Hi.
This is a tough topic.
This is a tough topic, I know.
But we had a request, so I think from Danny, so we're going to honor that request.
Yeah, we're really happy that when people reach out to us and give us ideas for show topics. So today we want to, talk about something that Danny had asked us to talk about, which is how the difference between grieving when someone suddenly dies or when it's a long-term death like cancer or someone's been sick for a while.
Right, an anticipated death.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
So I think we both have stories that we can tell. Obviously, we can, I lost my brother when I was younger, which I've talked about before. That was a sudden death.
Yes.
And you are going through...
Yes, so my father that raised me, he adopted me when I was, I think, 7, but he's been with me since I was 2. Kind of difficult relationship throughout the years, but 4 months ago he went into hospice, and we had been a bit estranged prior to that, so he reached out to me, and I've been there for the past 4 months. At least in the beginning every day, because I thought, this is my last week, and now we're at 4 months, and we tease and joke like, all right, he'll be here till he's 90. But he is dying of bone cancer. So exactly what Danny's asking is sudden, which you went through,
right,
versus kind of watching someone losing their battle. And he is in hospice, and they're pretty clear that he's never going to leave hospice. So what are the differences?
Yeah, and the other thing I think we need to just honor as well are all the families of the Parkland victims. I mean, that obviously something like that, so sudden.
Traumatic.
I've told you this. I don't know if I've told our viewers for what your friends won't tell you, but one of my dear friends, Sean Sherlock, her niece, Gina, was one of the victims of the Parkland school shooting. And I saw a video with her parents were at the state capitol when they signed that legislation, the legislation, the school safety legislation, and just the grief on Sean's sister's face, of Gina's mother, just looking at her, it just broke my heart. Because I mean they're already fighting to make sure this doesn't happen again, and it's literally weeks after they've suddenly lost their daughter.
So brave, so courageous, so amazing. It's just amazing.
But I guess that's part of the grief process,
yes,
right?
Yes,
is wanting to do
power.
something.
Yeah, taking your power. It's like taking your power back in some way. I think for some people that saves them. It's like, what are your options? Crawl into a hole and just literally pull the covers up over your head and and not want to get out for a year, or go and fight and make a difference and say, you know what, because of us, you don't have to suffer this, or this was thwarted and lives were saved. I mean, making that difference, on that topic, being with the news station, doing the Ask Shannon segment, the first couple times, I've been there 2 years. So the first thing that happened when I was there is like, oh, Shannon, can you come in and talk about trauma, blah, blah, blah. Okay, sure. And then the Orlando thing happened, the Pulse thing. It's like, Shannon, can you come in? I'm like, absolutely. This time I was like, I have been on call. I'm not doing it, because you know what? Here's the thing. There's nothing I can say anymore. And that's why I just applaud your friend's sister and their family, because this is what I would say if I went on. There's nothing more I can say. I can't tell you to meditate. I can't tell you to pray about it. I can't tell you to keep people in your thoughts and prayers. All I can tell you is do action and take your power back and do something, because that, at this point, at this stage, that's the only thing that's going to make anybody feel this much better, is to change the way it is.
Yeah. It's interesting. I saw the parents of that FSU pledge who also died. He was, died of alcohol poisoning at a frat party. And they said it had to do with hazing. But the interesting thing, sorry, turning off my
Your digital athletics is back on board.
Let me just turn that off. The parents did the same thing. They said, this is all that we can do, is get federal hazing laws, because we have to do something to honor our son, and I just feel like there's, that is healing for a lot of these. But how is the grieving different for a sudden, and that's what Danny was asking, the grieving process. I feel like with sudden, you start with just, is it even real?
Yeah, so just back to the basics, Kubler-Ross, who was so amazing, did the 5 stages of grieving 100,000 years ago. The first one being shock and disbelief. Second one being bargaining, kind of making, arrangements like, okay, take me instead. We go into that, please, can I have them back, or one more day. Then anger typically shows up, sadness, and acceptance. And please know, these don't always go in perfect order, and we can jump back and forth between anger, sadness, all of that. But what we find, or what, I'm kind of researching, and when we're talking, that shock and awe and disbelief is so profound. I mean, can you imagine the Parkland situation? You're driving to pick your kid up from school, and they're saying, I'm sorry, she's gone forever. It's like, get me someone else to talk to.
Yeah.
This cannot be happening.
Yeah.
It can't be true. I could imagine as a parent running through the school, going to their locker, like trying to find them. Like, there's no way this is true. So intense shock and disbelief when you have a sudden loss versus I'm not going to be behaving that way when my dad passes. But what we find is that the shock is still there. It's like, I probably would have to go to hospice and see that empty bed. And I know I walked in there yesterday and the bed was empty, and it kind of took my breath away. He was in the bathroom, thank goodness. But I did a scan. It was like, the wheelchair's there. He's not on a walk.
Right.
He's not in his bed. And I kind of turned around, and then I came back and I went, take a deep breath. And, and he was in the bathroom. But it's like, you're still going to have that feeling. And I know the same with my grandmother. I was still, she was older, she had dementia. It shouldn't be shocking, but it does take your breath away. But then the acceptance comes very quickly that, okay, this is real. Where I think for somebody where it's sudden, I think that disbelief can go for a long time. I remember as a child, we lost one of my mom's besties. I mean, she was seeing her every week. There was 6 or 8 of them, and I just loved her so much. And she died of cancer, and I was young enough to be shielded, so I didn't know any of that. And I remember going out to the mailbox the very next day and getting the mail, and somebody pulled in our driveway for a minute and then pulled back out. And I ran back and I said, Mom, Pat was just outside. She pulled in the driveway. And my mom looked at me and she's like, sweetheart, she died. And it was like, what? It was like another shock because it was sudden for me.
Right.
And so that inability to wrap your head around it, I think, is pretty powerful.
Yeah, that happened with me with my brother. I remember, as I've said before, he fell out of a tree. We lived in a very small town. He hit his head on a huge root. We were up playing in a huge oak tree. And by the time we got him to the hospital, because we did not have 911, we didn't have ambulance service, we had to drive him to meet the ambulance. And I remember that by the time we got there, he was brain dead. But I remember my parents brought me into the room where he was, and he was hooked up to all the machines, so he was still technically alive. And they brought me in there to just talk to him or see him. And obviously, they were doing that too. Say my final goodbye, but I had no idea, that that's what they were doing. So we spent the night at my aunt's house the next day, or that night, and I thought he was fine. And I remember the next day my mom showed up, and they broke the news to me, and I was like, what? I thought he was fine. Right. You can't process it. And especially as an 8-year-old child. So I just remember that being so shocking to me because I thought everything was fine. Yeah. He was at the hospital and all the things were hooked up, and he was still breathing and everything was fine. Yeah. But in reality. But I hate talking about. See, Danny, this is what
Danny loves.
No more of these topics, okay?
Danny says these are his favorites when we are in touch with our hearts. So you're getting a big gift today. No, but you know what? You really. This is why I love you so much. That you do just share from your heart and so raw. There's so many people that are experiencing this, that have experienced. I mean, look at our country right now. All the people in Vegas. Yeah. All those families. I know. Plane crashes, these train derailing. I mean, so many people are right there with you saying, what are you talking talking about?
Yeah.
What do you mean? I just talked to them. I just
saw
saw
my
them.
daughter. I just saw my brother.
5 minutes ago, I just hung up the phone.
Yeah.
And so...
And my heart goes out to those I go back to the Parkland because it is so new. And I just think of all those parents that sent their kids to school, and did they tell them, hey buddy, I love you, or hey honey, I love you, and racking their brain, did I tell them I love them, or did they know how much they meant to me? And I just
that's another difference. That is a big thing with sudden death. Is guilt, regret, remorse. Did I say everything that I need? Did they know how I felt? All of that is really intense for somebody with a sudden loss, and so much guilt for any moment missed or anything you didn't say. And of course, we all want to live our lives like that, but let's be realistic, especially for those Parkland people. I mean, you're dropping your kid off at school, get out of the car, I'm late for work, and you're stressed, and you're like, hey, I love you, kiss, and you're just so overwhelmed, and that's just part of our lives. It's one thing if you're putting someone on a plane, you might take another minute, but you don't expect it every day. You just don't expect it. So that's another big difference, is people spend a lot of time kind of spinning in my office. I should have done this, I should have said that, I should have, the regrets, the remorse. And so and what the tool I try to give them is just helping them understand we are all doing the best that we can at any given moment, and that is accounted for. Like, that person knew your heart. That you didn't have to say I love you that day, or that you had an argument but I said something wrong. But they knew your heart for all the days before that, and all the love before that, and all the connection before that.
I wonder, is there more as you get older or as you go on, is there more trauma from a sudden death? Like, does it create more trauma around that death than, say, someone who has been sick? I don't know, because I have to tell you, my girlfriend Tina lost her mother, and I've talked about her before, and it was very painful for her. Her mother was sick for a very long time. But she kept thinking that there was hope, that she would survive and she would get better.
You know what you're highlighting for me, Suzanne, is I think the answer to your question is that there's more trauma, definitely, because it's literally a traumatic event, because you didn't see it coming. It happened in a moment, and so then you go into that PTSD, your brain takes pictures, all that stuff that I've explained before. But what I'm hearing with Tina and what you're saying to me is, any relationship, and I say this a lot with people going through breakups, in my opinion, relationships have a beginning, a middle, and an end. When you're going through a breakup, a divorce. And so I think if you look at that, hospice says there's a time to be born and there's a time to die. And it's such a beautiful spiritual way of looking at it. But when you think about it, when you lose your mom when she's 60, that's not the end. You expected you were going to have her till she was 80. You expected that you were going to be at the nursing home with her. And I find in watching this, that it's been a lot of loss in the past couple of years. My husband lost his father to dementia. It was August. And so, you're watching the decline. You're watching this person suffering. They went from home to the nursing home to losing weight to all of that. So he has grieved intensely, but not shocked. And also the beginning, middle, and end. Gosh, I lost my dad when I lost him to dementia. I haven't been able to connect with him in that way for years. I've been grieving. I watched him grieve. I've been with my husband 9 years in September. So when I got on the scene, his dad was just, maybe 2 years in, he just started to slip, and the family was starting to go, did you catch that? And I think he's forgetting. And being a clinician, I'm like, I didn't have any denial because I wasn't as bonded. So I was like, he's, and I was and my husband go, I think he did great tonight. I think he was really sharp. And I'd be thinking,
they don't see it, or they don't want to see it.
He was in denial, but then, and then I was slowly like, honey, did you, and so then we went through the whole process, a beginning, a middle. And so you're never ready, and the intensest grief. But I feel like those folks, it's like, okay, well, he was older and he did have this suffering thing and he was debilitated. So there are some blessings to him not suffering. And there's more of a process that at the end versus the person, I feel like Tina, like you said, she expected, like, this is my mom. We're so close. We shop together. We love each other. We're going to have till the end. Until she's 85 and I'm annoyed by her, or till she's got a walker and she, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And when it doesn't happen and you don't get that completion, I see this so much in relationships where the people break up in the, what I call the honeymoon stage. They are rocked. They're talking about somebody they were with for 3 months. They're talking about it for 9.
Yeah.
And it's like, let it go. You was only 3 months. But they didn't get to the part where they were fighting and there was a power struggle. And then they realized they didn't like this about them. And they had a list of pros and cons and things they loved and hated. And
they
then
just
got
were
to
in the honeymoon stage.
yeah. And so I will spend literally months with somebody who was only with somebody for 3 months because there was no closure. There was no middle and end. So I feel like that has a lot to do with it as well.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because my grandmother, who was, gosh, in her mid to late 90s when she died, and my mom was taking care of her. And she was still pretty much all there. She just was really old. And I remember when I was pregnant with my son, she was in the bedridden, and my mom told me to come into town to see her because she wasn't sure how much longer she was going to last. Right. Well, she lasted many years after that. Yeah. But I remember talking to my grandmother, and my grandmother said, you know, some people just live too long. And she was okay with going. And so when she was okay with going, it was good with my mom. Right. You know, and it was good with me because you know, she
felt like she made the end.
She felt like she had a long life, and she was okay to go. And so I think that makes a huge difference as well, because, you know, with Tina's mom, she was still really fighting this cancer, and she really wanted to still live. And so that makes a huge difference.
I think so too.
When the person who's dying or is sick is ready or says, I'm ready to go, I'm ready to let go, I think that also helps the person they're leaving behind.
Yes, I've seen that too, where they are finally like, I'm good. Even when they're fighting cancer or whatever, that they're like, I'm good, I'm ready to go. And then their children, their spouse can move into a little more celebrating them. Not right away, but it's more like, oh, I bet they're up there dancing a jig. That's what we said about my grandma. She loved to dance. We're like, oh, she's up there dancing. You know, it's like you can feel like they're now in a better place, even though don't ever say that to anybody because it always makes them feel horrible. But you know, but that concept. So I think that that's a big difference. But definitely the trauma, I don't see it so much as traumatic when it's long term, except the trauma of watching someone like that's really suffering. That feels, you know, that traumatic. Brings up those same endorphins in your brain of watching somebody struggle and suffer or cry or be, you know, writhing in pain. I think that experience can be traumatizing. Yeah.
Well, I think no matter how your loved one passes, it's grief. It is grief.
Painful.
It is painful, and it is something that will take you years. Clearly, as you can see, I am now almost 45. So that was how many years ago?
Yeah.
I mean, is that crazy that it still has that kind of such traumatic emotional response from me? Yeah. And literally, I mean, it's like I don't think about him every day anymore. Like I'm sure I did when I was younger. Right. But the minute I start to talk about Trace and his death, it like literally has that hold on me.
And I think that might be another difference of sudden and premature versus watching an illness. My mother's brother was also killed when I think he was 18 or 19. He was beaten to death, alcohol related, and died in my mother's arms. Oh. And same thing. You and my mom could have a conversation and she could be laughing, and the minute she shares her story or shares anything about her brother, she's right you are. And my grandmother was the same. And again, they didn't talk about it often, but you bring it up and it is right there as if it was
yesterday.
And yet we're not there with my grandmother. My grandmother lived to be 84. She died, she had dementia first. She had a long life. I mean, it still felt like we wish we had more years. But when we talk about her now, we don't sob. We laugh, we tease, we tell funny stories. We just did that the other night at the dinner table, and it was so fun to just tease and laugh. And God, she was such a force, and just enjoy her spirit and talk about it. And nobody cried. We all laughed, and we finally arrived there. It's been about 13 years. But if I would have brought up my mom's brother, that would not have happened.
Been the case. Yeah.
No, there would be no celebrating and laughing about his funny traits. It would have been right back to the trauma.
Yeah.
So I do think that is a big thing. The other thing that bears mentioning, although it's kind of assumed, but if you do have an opportunity like I have to say those things that you need to say, but I will tell you, he took a turn recently, and he slept all day. He's having a lot more pain, and he hadn't been sleeping, and then he slept all day. And I was crying with my husband that night, and I said, but what if I never get a lucid moment with him again? Even though I have had 4 months to say and do, I went right into that. Oh God, but what if there's something I didn't say? And what if I never, because I think we are never ready to not have another day or another moment or another, expression back and forth. So I think the article that we were kind of looking at and all, grief is grief. Pain is pain. Loss is loss. And we're all going to do pieces of all of this.
Yeah. And just be really gentle when you're talking to someone, because just because someone was sick for a while, and they lost their loved one, or that loved one passed after being sick for a while, it doesn't make it any easier. I think we think, oh, well, they were sick for a while, so
they're in a better place.
And you're not really, you've already dealt with your grief. I mean, it's still extremely painful, when you lose someone, or, hey, they had a good life, but, and, even someone in their 60s, if, we think, oh, well, they've lived a full life, but when you're not expecting them to leave,
No, I mean, that's still in today's day, that's very young.
Right. 60 is a new 40.
Yeah, it is. No, and there was something else that just popped in my head, and of course, because I'm 46, it popped right back out. Oh, darn it.
We were talking about the,
Left. It'll be gone.
Okay. Well, I think we answered the question though about the difference between sudden and prolonged illness and death.
It came back.
Oh yes,
this is 46. It comes back. It loops back around. I think it also matters who someone is to someone.
Yes.
Because I'm starting to learn. Unfortunately, I'm at that age where when I've learned from people that when you lose your parents and you're the next generation, where's the other people that are supposed to go before me?
Right.
And there's no one. That also creates, and I have a lot of people that I know that are only children, and they talk about how profound it is when you lose your parents and you're an only child, because you don't have siblings.
Yeah.
There's no one flanking you. There's no one above. It's you. And so the sense of I am alone in the world, even if you're married, even if you have children, is very profound.
That was
that's
Tina's.
huge.
Yeah, that was. Tina felt very alone.
That's what I was thinking.
Because her mom
maybe she was an only.
Was her.
Yeah.
She's not an only child, but
she's very, very close.
She was extremely close to her mom. Her dad was not in the picture.
Yeah.
And
that makes sense. So that also, you have to be very sensitive to that when you say to somebody whose parent who's 85 and it's like, oh gosh, they're in a better place and they were suffering. Yeah, but this is my parent. Yeah. Like, this is the person that when I get scared, I feel like, and I'm sure you feel like this with Sissy, and I feel like this with my mom. It's like there's still times I'm like, I want my mom, and we can call them.
Right.
And when you cannot go to your mommy because it doesn't fit the script to call your daughter.
Right.
It's like,
well, and your mom is the only person you can really complain to, and,
and
and she will really listen and care.
Yeah, and unconditionally love you.
Right.
Parents unconditionally love children. I don't know that children unconditionally love parents. Definitely not. As a therapist, I've seen many people haul their parents into therapy. I have to tell you,
once you have kids, though, you start to unconditionally love your parents because you realize what they went through.
Yeah.
That's when you really start to realize. how much your parents did for you.
Yeah,
so, right?
No, it's so true.
Yeah.
But there's just nothing like that parent's love and that parent connection for many of us. Some of us are not blessed to have that, but if you do have that, that's a tough one to lose. And a sibling is right there with it because you never expect to lose them, whether they're a pain in your butt or not. You're going to have your sibling forever. You know, and so that is really tough stuff. And of course, losing a child is should be against the law.
Yeah.
So, so loss is tough. There's just no angle on this.
Yeah.
It's not
and
painful.
if you have been through sudden or a loss that you really are having a hard time dealing with, do not hesitate to reach out to a therapist and go to a grief therapist. There are therapists
really important. Yes.
that specialize in grief.
And hospice is a great referral source. So if you're kind of lost and you don't have a clue what grief therapist, call hospice because that's what they're experts in is, grief and death and dying and loss. So, and they also have many support groups at hospice, widowers and all kinds of stuff. So definitely get some support because the sense of pervasive aloneness and loneliness, it just exacerbates it, especially if you are a widow or you've lost your only child. So please get to support groups as well as individual counseling.
Yeah. And don't forget to share our videos, like our videos, leave a comment if you have a specific show topic you would like to us to talk about. Danny, I hope we answered your question.
Because we will do it.
We will do
even
it.
If it's painful.
Please don't make us cry anymore though. Can we take a break on the death segments, okay? Because I literally am going to. I'm not gonna be mascara left. All right. Well, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you back here next week for What Your Friends Won't Tell You. Bye.
Bye.